I remember the exact moment it hit me. I was sitting on my worn-out couch in my small, dimly lit apartment, clutching my phone as I scrolled through endless social media feeds. Picture-perfect lives flashed across the screen: exotic vacations, luxury cars, and sparkling homes. It seemed like everyone but me had cracked the code to financial freedom. Meanwhile, I was struggling to make ends meet, working long hours at a job I didn't love, and barely scraping by each month. My savings account was almost non-existent, and the thought of investing seemed like something only the wealthy could afford. But that night, something inside me shifted. I was tired of feeling stuck, tired of watching life pass me by while others thrived. I knew I had to do something, anything, to change my situation. But how? I had no financial background, no trust fund to fall back on, and certainly no rich relatives to bail me out. I had one thing, though: a burning desire to build a better life for myself. I didn't have much to my name, but I did have $100 stashed away in an old coffee can, a relic from my grandmother who always told me, "Save for a rainy day." Well, it felt like it had been pouring for months, and that $100 was all I had left. It wasn't much, but it was something. And that night, as I sat on that threadbare couch, I made a decision that would change the course of my life. I was going to invest that $100. It was a decision born out of desperation as much as hope. I had no idea where to start. The world of investing felt like a labyrinth of jargon and risks I didn't understand. But the alternative, continuing on the path I was on, was even scarier. So I took a deep breath, opened my laptop, and started researching. The first few weeks were a blur of confusion and frustration. I was overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information out there: stocks, bonds, ETFs, mutual funds, dividends, market caps. It was like learning a new language. I spent countless nights poring over articles, watching YouTube videos, and reading books about investing, trying to make sense of it all. There were moments when I felt like giving up. I'd think to myself, who am I kidding? I'm just a regular person with no background in finance. What makes me think I can actually do this? But then I'd remember why I started. I wasn't doing this just for myself. I was doing it for my future self, for the life I wanted to live, for the freedom I craved. One night, after hours of research, I stumbled upon a blog post about micro-investing platforms. These platforms allowed you to start investing with as little as $5. That was it. It was my way in. I realized I didn't need thousands of dollars to start building wealth. I just needed to start. The next day, with my heart pounding in my chest, I transferred my $100 into a micro-investing platform. I split it between a few different ETFs that were recommended for beginners. It wasn't a lot of money, and I knew I wasn't going to get rich overnight, but it felt like a monumental step forward. At first, I was obsessed with checking the performance of my investments. Every tiny fluctuation in the market felt like a life or death situation. But as time went on, I began to relax. I realized that investing wasn't about getting rich quick. It was about playing the long game. The more I learned, the more confident I became in my decisions. I started setting aside small amounts of money from each paycheck to add to my investments. It wasn't much, $10 here, $20 there, but it was something. And slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, I began to see my portfolio grow. But just when I was beginning to feel hopeful, life threw me a curveball. My car broke down, and the repair bill was far more than I could afford. I was faced with a tough decision: pull money from my investments or find another way to cover the cost. It was a painful moment. Part of me wanted to throw in the towel, to cash out my investments and return to the safety of my old habits. but another part of me knew that this was a test, a chance to prove to myself that I was serious about building wealth. I decided to find another way. I picked up extra shifts at work, cut back on non-essential expenses, and scraped together enough to cover the repairs without touching my investments. It was a small victory, but it felt enormous. For the first time, I felt like I had some control over my financial future. I wasn't just reacting to life's challenges. I was actively working towards a goal. Months passed, and I continued to invest steadily, learning more as I went. My portfolio wasn't huge, but it was growing. I started to see the power of compound interest, the way even small investments could grow over time if I was patient and disciplined. Then, one day, something unexpected happened. I received an email from the micro-investing platform informing me that one of the ETFs I had invested in had performed exceptionally well. My initial $100 had grown to over $500. I was stunned. It wasn't a life-changing amount of money, but it was proof that my efforts were paying off. That $500 represented more than just a financial gain. It was a validation of my hard work, my perseverance, and my belief in myself. That moment was a turning point for me. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the sense of empowerment that came with taking control of my financial future. I realized that if I could do this with $100, there was no limit to what I could achieve. With renewed confidence, I began to set bigger goals for myself. I started learning about different types of investments, individual stocks, index funds, real estate, and diversifying my portfolio. I set up automatic contributions to my investment accounts, making it a habit to pay myself first before anything else. I also began to share my journey with others. I started a blog where I documented my experiences, the mistakes I made, and the lessons I learned along the way. To my surprise, people began to reach out to me, thanking me for sharing my story and asking for advice on how they could start investing too. Helping others was incredibly rewarding, and it reinforced my belief that financial education is one of the most powerful tools we have. I realized that my journey wasn't just about building wealth for myself. It was about inspiring others to take control of their financial futures as well. But the road to financial independence wasn't without its setbacks. The market is unpredictable, and there were times when my investments took a hit. I watched as the value of my portfolio dipped, sometimes dramatically, and it was hard not to panic. There were nights when I lay awake, second-guessing my decisions, wondering if I had made a huge mistake. But each time I reminded myself why I started. I wasn't investing for short-term gains. I was investing for the long haul. I forced myself to stay the course, to trust the process, and to keep learning. One of the biggest challenges came during a market downturn. I watched in disbelief as the value of my portfolio plummeted, erasing months of gains in a matter of days. It was gut-wrenching, and the temptation to sell everything and cut my losses was overwhelming. But I didn't. I had learned enough by then to understand that downturns were a natural part of the market cycle. I knew that if I panicked and sold, I would only be locking in my losses. So I held on, even as the numbers on my screen continued to drop. It wasn't easy, but it was the right decision. Eventually, the market began to recover, and so did my portfolio. It was a painful lesson, but one that made me a stronger, more resilient investor. As time went on, I began to see the fruits of my labor. My portfolio continued to grow, and I started to explore other ways to build wealth. I opened a retirement savings account and began contributing to it regularly. I also started saving for a down payment on a home, something I had once thought was out of reach. I wasn't rich by any means, but I was building something real, something that had the potential to change my life. And it all started with that $100. I also began to develop a new mindset about money. I stopped seeing it as something to be feared or avoided and started seeing it as a tool that could help me achieve my goals and create the life I wanted. I became more intentional about my spending, focusing on what truly mattered to me and cutting out the rest. And as I continued to grow my wealth, I found that I wasn't just building financial security. I was building confidence, self-discipline, and a sense of purpose. I was proving to myself that I could do more than just survive. I could thrive. Years later, as I sit here telling my story, I can't help but feel a deep sense of pride in how far I've come. That initial $100 investment was just the beginning of a journey that has transformed my life in ways I never imagined. I've since achieved many of the goals I set for myself. I bought my first home, built a solid emergency fund, and even started investing in real estate. My portfolio has grown to a point where I no longer worry about financial emergencies. I know I have the resources to handle whatever comes my way, but perhaps the most rewarding part of this journey has been the impact it has had on others. Through my blog and social media, I've connected with countless people who, like me, felt stuck and unsure of where to start. I've had the privilege of helping them take their first steps towards financial independence. And there's nothing more gratifying than seeing someone else succeed because of something I shared. Looking back, I realize that the real wealth I've built isn't just in my bank account. It's in the knowledge, confidence, and resilience I've gained along the way. It's in the connections I've made, the people I've helped, and the life I've created for myself. So what's next? I'm still on this journey, still learning, still growing. I'm excited about the future and the opportunities that lie ahead. I know there will be challenges, there always are, but I also know that I have the tools and the mindset to overcome them. And it all started with a simple decision, a $100 investment, and a dream of something better. If there's one thing I've learned through this journey, it's that you don't need a lot of money to start building wealth. You just need to start. The rest will follow. So, to anyone reading this who feels like they're stuck or that building wealth is out of reach, I want you to know that it's possible. You don't have to have it all figured out right away. Just take that first step, no matter how small, and keep moving forward. Your future self will thank you. This is my story, but it can be yours too. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, or in my case, a single $100 investment. The road may be long and challenging, but trust me, it's worth it.